The Lost Treasure. Malik Johnson, a bright and curious 15-year-old, navigated the bustling streets of his neighborhood with practiced ease. The rhythmic clatter of basketballs echoed from the nearby courts, mingling with the aroma of sizzling barbecue from the corner shop. His sneakers, scuffed from daily use, pressed firmly against the cracked pavement as he walked home from school, backpack slung over one shoulder. Life wasn't easy for Malik. His mom, a night shift nurse at the local hospital, worked tirelessly to keep their lives afloat. Malik, ever dutiful, managed the household in her absence, ensuring the dishes were washed, homework completed, and their tiny yellow house stayed as neat as possible. But Malik wasn't one to complain. If anything, the challenges had shaped him into someone who understood the value of hard work, integrity, and resilience. He was thoughtful, introspective, and always trying to find the good in every situation. As he approached the bus stop on Maple Street, something unusual caught his eye. A sleek black wallet lay abandoned near the curb, its sharp edges glinting under the late afternoon sun. It seemed oddly out of place against the weathered concrete. Malik paused, his brow furrowing as he scanned the area. The street was quiet. A group of kids laughed and played basketball in the distance, and an elderly man dozed on a nearby bench, his straw hat tilted to shield his face from the sun. Cautiously, Malik bent down and picked up the wallet. It was heavy, the leather supple and expensive to the touch. Malik's fingers trembled slightly as he unzipped it and peered inside. His eyes widened. A thick stack of crisp $100 bills sat neatly folded inside, accompanied by a series of credit cards that gleamed gold and platinum. At the center was a driver's license bearing a name Malik knew all too well: Victor Allister, the billionaire philanthropist whose face regularly graced billboards, newspapers, and TV screens. Malik's heart pounded in his chest. Victor Allister, the man owned half the skyscrapers downtown and was known for his extravagant charity events and business acumen. But what was his wallet doing here, in Malik's modest neighborhood? Malik's fingers brushed over the bills, and a fleeting thought crossed his mind. What this money could do for his family. It could pay off their overdue rent, fix his mom's sputtering car, and even leave enough for a little breathing room. But as quickly as the thought came, it left. Malik's mother had always drilled the importance of honesty into him. Her words echoed in his mind. Integrity is worth more than gold. Always do what's right, even if it's hard. Malik closed the wallet and slipped it into his backpack, zipping it securely. He glanced over his shoulder, his instincts making him feel as though someone might be watching, though the street seemed as unassuming as ever. Still, a sense of unease prickled his skin as he walked the rest of the way home. In his small bedroom that evening, Malik sat on his bed, the wallet laid before him. The soft glow of his desk lamp illuminated its luxurious leather surface. He flipped through its contents again, careful not to disturb anything too much. Among the credit cards and cash was a sleek business card embossed with Victor Allister's name and a direct phone number. He debated for what felt like hours, weighing the pros and cons. The money was tempting. It could ease his mom's burden, make their lives a little easier. But every time he thought about keeping it, his mother's voice played in his head, reminding him of the values she'd instilled. Finally, Malik took a deep breath and picked up his phone. His hands were clammy as he dialed the number on the business card. The phone rang twice before a composed, professional voice answered. Victor Allister's office. How may I help you? Malik's voice wavered as he replied. Hi, my name is Malik Johnson. I found Mr. Allister's wallet today, and I'd like to return it. The line went silent for a moment before the assistant spoke again, her tone warm with relief. Thank you so much, Mr. Johnson. Mr. Allister has been quite concerned about this. Could we arrange for you to meet him tomorrow morning? They settled on a time and place, 9 a.m. at Allister's penthouse downtown. Malik jotted down the details and hung up, his stomach fluttering with nerves. As he lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, He couldn't shake the feeling that he'd just stepped into something far bigger than he could have anticipated. The next morning, Malik boarded the bus with the wallet safely tucked in his backpack. He'd never been to the part of town where Alistair's penthouse was located. As the bus wound through the streets, the scenery changed dramatically. The modest houses and corner shops of his neighborhood gave way to towering glass buildings and pristine sidewalks bustling with professionals. Malik stepped off the bus and craned his neck to take in the sight of Alistair's building. It was a gleaming skyscraper, its polished exterior reflecting the morning sun. The doorman, dressed in an immaculate uniform, greeted Malik with a polite nod as he stepped inside the grand lobby. A few moments later, Malik was escorted to the top floor by an assistant who barely glanced at him. When the elevator doors opened, he found himself standing in a lavish space that screamed wealth and power. Expensive art lined the walls, and the furniture looked like it had been plucked straight from a high-end design magazine. Victor Alistair appeared moments later, his silver hair neatly combed and his sharp suit fitting him like a glove. He extended a hand to Malik, his smile warm but calculated. "Malik Johnson, I presume. Thank you for taking the time to return this," Alistair said, taking the wallet from Malik's outstretched hand. He opened it and checked its contents before looking back at Malik with an appraising gaze. "Not many people would have done what you did," Alistair said, his tone measured. "What made you return it?" Malik shrugged, feeling a bit self-conscious. "It's the right thing to do. My mom always says honesty is important." Alistair's lips curved into a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Your mother sounds like a wise woman." He reached into his pocket and handed Malik a crisp envelope. "Please accept this as a small token of my gratitude." Inside, Malik glimpsed a stack of $100 bills. He blinked, overwhelmed by the gesture. "Thank you," Malik stammered, "but it wasn't necessary." "Nonsense," Alistair replied smoothly. He pulled out another card, a silver one this time, and pressed it into Malik's hand. "This is my personal line. If you ever need anything, don't hesitate to call." As Malik walked out of the building, his mind was a whirlwind of thoughts. The crisp bills in the envelope felt heavy in his pocket, and the silver card seemed to burn in his palm. But what lingered most was a gnawing unease he couldn't quite place, as though he'd just made a choice that would ripple far beyond this moment. And as he climbed onto the bus, heading back home, Malik didn't notice the black SUV idling near the corner, its tinted windows hiding the faces of the men inside who were watching him intently. The black SUV. The rumble of the bus's engine vibrated through Malik's seat as he clutched his backpack tightly against his chest. The leather wallet was gone, but in its place was something intangible, a sense of unease that hadn't lifted since he stepped out of Victor Alistair's penthouse. The envelope weighed heavily in his pocket. He hadn't even counted the money, though he could guess it was far more than he'd ever held in his life. But it wasn't the money that made his chest tighten with anxiety. It was the way Alistair had looked at him, not with the warm gratitude Malik had expected, but with something far more calculating, as though he were sizing him up for reasons unknown. As the bus rumbled past rows of modest homes and convenience stores, Malik tried to shake the feeling. He reminded himself he'd done the right thing. Returning the wallet was what his mom would have wanted, and the reward, though overwhelming, was proof that honesty was valued. Or so he hoped. Back in his small bedroom, Malik emptied the contents of his pocket onto his bed, the silver card, the envelope of cash, and his phone. He stared at the items as if they might explain the strange sense of dread he couldn't shake. After a long moment, he opened the envelope and counted the money. $2,000. His breath caught. It was more money than his mom made in a month of grueling hospital shifts. The possibilities raced through his mind. Paying overdue bills, repairing the sputtering car that stalled every other day, or even replacing his worn-out sneakers. But alongside the excitement came guilt. Could he really keep the money? Was it truly a reward for his honesty, or was there more to Alistair's gesture than met the eye? Malik's thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock at his door. His mom peeked her head in, her eyes tired but filled with warmth. "Dinner's ready, baby," she said, her voice a soothing balm to his frayed nerves. "You've been quiet since you got home. Everything okay?" Malik nodded quickly, shoving the cash back into the envelope and slipping it into his backpack. "Yeah, Mom. Just tired from school." Her brow furrowed slightly, but she didn't press further. "All right, but if something's bothering you, you can tell me. You know that, right?" "Yeah, Mom. Thanks." That night, Malik lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. The room was dark except for the faint glow of the streetlight filtering through his curtains. His mind replayed the events of the day: the gleaming penthouse, Alistair's piercing gaze, and the menacing black SUV he'd noticed parked near the corner as the bus pulled away. He'd dismissed it at the time as coincidence, but now, alone in the quiet of his room, the memory felt more ominous. He sat up abruptly, his pulse quickening. Had he really seen the SUV again, or was his mind playing tricks on him? He pulled his curtain aside and peered out into the street. The usual stillness of the neighborhood greeted him, but a chill ran down his spine when his eyes landed on a dark vehicle parked a few houses down. The SUV was identical to the one he'd seen earlier, sleek, polished, and out of place in his modest neighborhood. Its tinted windows gleamed under the streetlight, and though Malik couldn't see inside, he felt certain someone was watching. He let the curtain fall back, his heart hammering in his chest. The next morning, Malik tried to shake off the lingering anxiety as he walked to school. His backpack felt heavier than usual, even though it carried nothing more than books and the envelope of cash. He told himself he was imagining things. The SUV was probably just a coincidence. Maybe a neighbor had a visitor. There was no reason to think it had anything to do with him. But as he rounded the corner near his school, the SUV was there again, idling at the curb. Malik's steps faltered, and he quickly ducked into a nearby alley, his heart pounding. He leaned against the wall, trying to catch his breath. Peeking around the corner, he saw the vehicle still there, its engine purring softly. Two men sat inside, their silhouettes faintly visible through the tinted windows. Malik turned and took the long way to school, weaving through back streets and alleys. By the time he arrived, his shirt clung to his back with sweat, and his chest heaved from the exertion. He slipped into his first period class just as the bell rang, his eyes scanning the room nervously. "Late again, Mr. Johnson," Mr. Bradshaw said, raising an eyebrow. "Try to be punctual next time." "Sorry," Malik mumbled, sliding into his seat. His classmates barely noticed his entrance, but Malik felt like all eyes were on him. Throughout the day, Malik couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. He caught glimpses of the SUV parked near the school entrance during lunch, and again as he left for the day. Each time, his stomach twisted into knots. Who were they? And what did they want? By the time he got home, Malik had made up his mind. He couldn't keep this to himself any longer. He needed advice, someone to tell him he wasn't overreacting. His first thought was Jamal, his best friend since 6th grade. Jamal knew him better than anyone and always had his back. That evening, Malik met Jamal at the basketball court near their neighborhood. The familiar thump of the ball against the pavement and the laughter of kids playing nearby brought a small measure of comfort. Malik leaned against the chain-link fence, clutching the backpack straps tightly. "Yo, Malik," Jamal called, jogging over. "You look like you've seen a ghost. What's up?" Malik hesitated, glancing around to make sure no one was within earshot. "I need to tell you something, but you have to promise not to tell anyone." Jamal's playful demeanor shifted as he caught the seriousness in Malik's voice. "Of course, man. What's going on?" Malik recounted the events of the past 2 days. The lost wallet, the visit to Alistair's penthouse, the reward, and the black SUV that seemed to be following him. Jamal listened intently, his brows furrowing deeper with each word. "That's wild," Jamal said when Malik finished. You think it's really connected to the wallet. I don't know what else it could be, Malik admitted. But something feels off. Those guys in the SUV, they're not just random. Jamal rubbed his chin thoughtfully. Have you told your mom? No, I don't want to worry her. She's got enough on her plate. Jamal nodded, then clapped a hand on Malik's shoulder. We'll figure this out, man. Just don't do anything dumb, okay? That night, Malik stayed awake long after his mom had gone to bed. The envelope of cash sat on his desk, mocking him with its weight. He couldn't keep it. He had to return it. He picked up the silver card Alistair had given him and stared at the number, debating whether to call. But something in his gut told him Alistair wasn't the type of man you could simply walk away from. As he lay back on his bed, Malik resolved to find out who was watching him and why. But deep down, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was in far deeper than he ever imagined. And as the night stretched on, the black SUV remained parked down the street, its occupants waiting patiently in the shadows. The shadows close in. Malik's night was restless, filled with vivid dreams of dark alleys, shadowy figures, and the gleaming silver card that seemed to glow ominously in his hand. He awoke with a start, the faint light of dawn spilling through his bedroom window. His heart raced, and sweat slicked his forehead. The sense of dread that had been haunting him for days now felt like a storm cloud hanging directly overhead. Dragging himself out of bed, he splashed cold water on his face and stared at his reflection in the bathroom mirror. His brown eyes looked hollow, encircled by dark rings from nights of restless sleep. He felt a pang of guilt. His mother had enough to worry about without him adding to her stress, but he couldn't shake the feeling that things were spiraling out of control. At school, Malik's paranoia followed him like a second shadow. Every glance from a teacher, every hushed whisper from a classmate, every creak of the floorboards felt like a threat. And though Jamal's reassuring presence at lunch was comforting, it wasn't enough to quell the mounting tension in Malik's chest. Yo, you're jumpier than a squirrel on caffeine, Jamal said, leaning across the lunch table. You gotta chill, man. Malik forced a laugh, though it felt hollow. It's not just the SUV. It's everything. I can't explain it, but something feels really wrong. Jamal leaned back, crossing his arms. Maybe you're right. But until we know for sure, we should probably keep our heads down. Don't do anything crazy. Malik nodded, though he wasn't sure he could follow that advice. Something needed to be done, and soon. That evening, Malik returned home to an empty house. His mother had picked up an extra shift at the hospital, leaving him alone until late. He dropped his backpack on the couch and peered out the living room window. Sure enough, the black SUV was still there, parked just a few houses down. It hadn't moved since the day before. His mind raced. Why were they following him? What did they want? He knew he couldn't keep ignoring it. He had to do something. With a deep breath, Malik grabbed his phone and dialed the number on Victor Alistair's silver card. His fingers trembled as he held the phone to his ear. The line rang twice before a familiar, smooth voice answered. Victor Alistair speaking. Malik swallowed hard. Mr. Alistair, it's Malik Johnson. I found your wallet the other day. There was a brief pause, and Malik thought he heard the faintest rustle, as if Alistair were adjusting in his chair. Ah, Malik, I'm glad you called. Is everything all right? Malik hesitated, unsure how to phrase his concern. I think someone's been following me. There's this black SUV that's been outside my house and my school. Alistair's tone didn't change, remaining calm and measured. That's very concerning. I assure you, Malik, it has nothing to do with me. However, I'll have my security team look into it. You've been very helpful to me, and I want to make sure you're safe. Malik nodded, though Alistair couldn't see him. Thank you, sir. I wanted to let you know. Of course, and Malik, if you notice anything else unusual, don't hesitate to call me. The call ended, but Malik didn't feel any safer. If anything, Alistair's calm demeanor unsettled him further. He'd expected the billionaire to sound surprised or alarmed, but his response had been almost rehearsed. Did Alistair know more than he was letting on? Later that night, as Malik sat at his desk pretending to do homework, his phone buzzed with a text from Jamal. Jamal. Yo, you okay? Malik hesitated before replying. Malik. Yeah, just trying to figure out what to do about this SUV situation. Jamal's response came quickly. Jamal, you sure you don't want to tell your mom? She should know if this is serious. Malik sighed, his eyes drifting to the window. The SUV was still there, its dark, glossy exterior reflecting the dim glow of the streetlights. He couldn't bring himself to involve his mom. Not yet. She worked too hard and worried too much already. Malik. Not yet. I'll handle it. Jamal didn't reply, but Malik could feel his concern through the silence. The next day, Malik woke to find the SUV gone. For a moment, relief flooded him. Maybe they'd given up. Maybe the call to Alistair had scared them off. But as he walked to school, the tension in his shoulders didn't ease. He couldn't shake the feeling that the calm was temporary, a lull before the storm. Sure enough, the SUV reappeared just as he reached the school gates. This time, Malik forced himself to confront it. He stopped on the sidewalk, squaring his shoulders and glaring at the vehicle. His heart pounded in his chest as he waited, hoping someone inside would step out and explain themselves. The SUV's engine idled, its tinted windows betraying nothing. For a moment, Malik considered walking up to the driver's side window and knocking. But before he could act, the vehicle's engine roared, and it sped off down the street, disappearing around the corner. Malik stood frozen, his fists clenched at his sides. This wasn't random. Whoever was in that SUV wanted him to know they were watching. By the time Malik got home that afternoon, he was more determined than ever to get answers. He retrieved the envelope of cash from his backpack and stared at it for a long moment before shoving it into his pocket. He didn't care about the money. He cared about understanding why his life had turned into a game of cat and mouse. He left the house without telling his mom, making his way downtown. He didn't have an appointment with Alistair this time, but he didn't care. He needed to see the man face to face. The sun was setting by the time Malik arrived at Alistair Tower, the building's glass facade glowing like a beacon against the darkening sky. The doorman gave him a curious look but didn't stop him as he entered the lobby. Malik approached the receptionist, his voice steady despite the nerves twisting in his stomach. "I need to speak with Mr. Alistair," he said. "It's urgent." The receptionist frowned, her manicured fingers poised over her keyboard. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but..." Before Malik could finish, a tall man in a suit appeared from one of the side doors. His expression was neutral, but his presence radiated authority. "Mr. Johnson," he said, his voice smooth but firm. "Mr. Alistair is expecting you." Malik blinked. Expecting him? He hadn't even called ahead. Something about this felt wrong, but he followed the man to the elevator anyway, the weight of the cash in his pocket growing heavier with each step. The elevator ride was silent, the soft hum of the machinery doing little to ease Malik's nerves. When the doors opened, he found himself once again in the opulent penthouse. Alistair stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, his back to Malik as he gazed out at the city skyline. "Malik," Alistair said without turning around, "what brings you here tonight?" "I need answers," Malik said, his voice stronger than he felt. "Why am I being followed? What aren't you telling me?" Alistair turned slowly, his sharp features illuminated by the soft glow of the city lights. For a moment, his expression was unreadable. Then he smiled, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Why don't we sit down and talk?" Alistair gestured to the sleek leather chairs near his desk. "I think it's time you understood the full picture." Malik hesitated, his pulse quickening. He didn't know what Alistair was about to reveal, but deep down, he knew it would change everything. Secrets revealed. Malik hesitated at the edge of the room, his eyes darting from Victor Alistair's composed figure to the sleek leather chair he had been directed toward. The penthouse's opulence seemed more intimidating now than impressive, each luxurious detail reinforcing the growing chasm between his modest world and Alistair's enigmatic empire. "Have a seat," Alistair urged again, his voice calm but commanding, as if he had all the time in the world. His presence filled the room like a thundercloud, the air growing heavy with unspoken tension. Malik stepped forward reluctantly and sank into the chair, his backpack clutched tightly in his lap. Alistair remained standing, his silhouette framed by the sprawling city skyline visible through the penthouse's floor-to-ceiling windows. For a moment, neither spoke, the silence punctuated only by the faint hum of the air conditioning. "You're quite the curious young man, aren't you?" Alistair began, his tone almost conversational. He turned and fixed Malik with a piercing gaze. "You returned my wallet. Most people wouldn't have bothered, much less resisted the temptation to take a little something for themselves. That impressed me." Malik didn't reply, his fingers tightening around the straps of his backpack. He couldn't decide if Alistair's words were meant as praise or as a calculated move to disarm him. "But now you're asking questions," Alistair continued, his smile fading. "And questions, Malik, can be dangerous." "I didn't ask to be followed," Malik said, his voice steadier than he expected. "I just want to know why. What do you want from me?" Alistair regarded him for a long moment, then moved to his desk and opened a drawer. From inside, he pulled out a slim file folder and placed it on the glass surface. He tapped the folder with one manicured finger, his expression unreadable. "You stumbled into something, Malik," Alistair said, his voice low. "Something that doesn't concern you. But unfortunately, you've made it your concern." Malik frowned, his heart pounding in his chest. "What do you mean?" Alistair slid the folder across the desk toward Malik, gesturing for him to open it. With trembling hands, Malik set his backpack aside and reached for the folder. As he flicked it open, his stomach dropped. Inside were photographs, grainy but unmistakable, of Malik at various points over the past few days. One showed him holding the wallet near the bus stop. Another captured him walking into the penthouse building. A third, taken just outside his school, showed him glancing nervously at the black SUV. "Those are just the ones we kept," Alistair said, leaning back in his chair. "My security team has been keeping an eye on you, Malik. For your own protection, of course." "Protection?" Malik echoed, disbelief and anger rising in his voice. "You call following me around in a black SUV protection? I didn't ask for any of this." Alistair's calm demeanor cracked slightly, his eyes narrowing. "No, you didn't. But you involved yourself when you returned that wallet." Malik's gaze darted back to the photos, then to the other papers in the folder. They detailed financial records, transactions involving massive sums of money, and unfamiliar names, some marked with red X, others circled in blue ink. His hands began to shake as the implications set in. What is all this?" he whispered. "It's the reality of the world I live in," Alistair replied, his voice cold now. "A world where power and influence mean everything. That wallet you returned, it contained more than just money and credit cards. It held information that certain people would kill to obtain." Malik's chest tightened as he remembered the unease he felt since finding the wallet. "Then why didn't you tell me this before? Why let me think it was just a reward for doing the right thing?" Alistair's lips pressed into a thin line. "Because I hoped it wouldn't come to this. I hoped you'd take the money and move on. But your curiosity has put you in danger, Malik. And now, we're both entangled in this mess." Malik's mind raced as he tried to piece together the puzzle. The documents in the folder painted a picture of a vast, shadowy network. Transactions tied to offshore accounts, coded communications, and connections to individuals with criminal histories. It was a world Malik had only ever heard about in movies, and now he was staring at it in black and white. "Who are you really?" Malik asked, his voice trembling. "I'm exactly who I appear to be," Alistair replied. "A businessman, a philanthropist. But in this world, those roles come with complications." "You're laundering money, aren't you?" Malik blurted out, his fear giving way to anger. "That's what all of this is about." Alistair's eyes narrowed. "Careful, Malik. You're treading on dangerous ground." "Dangerous?" Malik shot back, standing abruptly. "You've been lying to me, using me. And now you're telling me I'm in danger because of you." The silence that followed was deafening. Alistair stood slowly, his imposing figure towering over Malik. For the first time, his calm facade cracked, revealing a glimpse of the ruthless man beneath. "I didn't ask for your involvement," Alistair said, his voice low and menacing. "But now that you're here, you have a choice to make. Either you keep quiet and let me handle this, or you try to play hero and put yourself and your family in the crosshairs." Malik's breath caught. The mention of his family sent a cold wave of fear through him. His mom had no idea what was happening, no idea of the storm Malik had unwittingly walked into. "What do you want from me?" Malik asked again, his voice barely above a whisper. "For now, nothing," Alistair said, straightening his tie. "Go home, act normal, and if anyone asks, you know nothing about any of this." The ride home was a blur. Malik barely registered the plush interior of the chauffeured car Alistair had insisted on sending him home in. His mind was consumed by the events of the evening, the weight of the folder still heavy in his hands. When the car pulled up outside his house, Malik hesitated before stepping out. He glanced at the driver, who gave him a curt nod but said nothing. The SUV idled at the curb until Malik was safely inside, then disappeared into the night. In the safety of his room, Malik spread the contents of the folder across his desk, studying each piece carefully. Every document, every photograph seemed to confirm what he'd suspected. Victor Alistair wasn't just a businessman. He was deeply enmeshed in something far more sinister. Malik knew he couldn't keep this to himself any longer. He needed help, but who could he trust? The police? Jamal? His mom? Every option felt fraught with risk. As he stared at the incriminating evidence, Malik's phone buzzed on the desk. It was a text from an unknown number. "Unknown. We need to talk. Meet me at the diner on 5th at 9 p.m. Alone." Malik's pulse quickened. He didn't recognize the number, but something told him this was connected to Alistair. Could it be someone from the black SUV? Or worse, someone trying to silence him? He glanced at the clock. It was 8:30 p.m. Against his better judgment, Malik grabbed his backpack, stuffed the folder inside, and slipped out of the house. The shadows of the night seemed to close in as he made his way to the diner, each step taking him deeper into the unknown. He had no idea what awaited him, but one thing was clear. The truth was far more dangerous than he'd ever imagined. The unexpected ally. The streets were eerily quiet as Malik approached the diner on 5th Street. The soft glow of the neon sign flickered in the darkness, casting distorted shadows on the cracked pavement. The familiar hum of the city seemed muffled, replaced by the rhythmic thud of Malik's heartbeat. Each step felt heavier than the last as he neared the small, nondescript building that was his destination. He paused at the entrance, glancing around the dimly lit street. There were no black SUVs, no lurking figures, yet the air felt thick with tension, like the moments before a storm. Malik pushed open the glass door, the bell above jingling faintly as he stepped inside. The diner was nearly empty. A lone waitress wiped down the counter, her movements slow and methodical. In the far corner, a figure sat with their back to the door, a hood pulled low over their face. Malik hesitated for a moment, then approached, clutching his backpack tightly. "You're here," the figure said without turning around. Their voice was low, tinged with urgency. Sit. Malik slid into the booth across from them, his eyes narrowing as he tried to make out their face beneath the hood. The person looked up, and Malik's breath caught. It was a girl, no older than him, with striking features and piercing eyes that seemed to see straight through him. Her dark hair was pulled into a tight ponytail, and her posture radiated an alertness that felt out of place for someone her age. "Who are you?" Malik demanded, his voice low but firm. "I'm Maya," she replied, her tone clipped. "Victor Alistair is my uncle." Malik blinked, his mind reeling. "Your uncle? What?" Maya cut him off, leaning forward so their conversation wouldn't carry to the waitress. "Listen carefully. I know you're in over your head, and I know my uncle's been watching you. You're not the first person he's dragged into his mess, but you might be the first who can help me stop him." "Stop him?" Malik echoed, his heart racing. "What are you talking about?" Maya glanced around the diner, her eyes scanning for anyone who might be listening. Satisfied they were alone, she leaned closer. "Victor Alistair isn't just a businessman. He's laundering money for some of the most dangerous people in the world. Arms dealers, drug cartels, you name it. And now, thanks to you, I have the proof I need to expose him." Malik's jaw tightened. "You mean the folder?" Maya nodded. "Exactly. He gave it to you because he thought it would scare you into silence. But if we use it the right way, we can bring his entire operation crashing down." Malik's mind raced. The folder was sitting in his backpack, mere inches away. "Why should I trust you? You're his family." Maya's expression hardened. "Because he ruined mine." Her voice cracked slightly, though her resolve didn't waver. "My dad, his brother, found out about the money laundering years ago. When he confronted Victor, Victor framed him for embezzlement. My dad lost everything: his job, his reputation, even his will to live." The weight of her words settled heavily between them. Malik saw the pain flicker in her eyes, the kind of pain that came from betrayal and loss. He believed her. "So what do we do?" Malik asked cautiously. Maya reached into her jacket and pulled out a small flash drive. She slid it across the table toward him. "This has everything I've been able to gather on him. Emails, wire transfers, offshore accounts. Combined with what you have in that folder, it's enough to take him down." Malik stared at the flash drive, the gravity of the situation sinking in. "And then what? What happens to us?" Maya hesitated, her confidence faltering for the first time. "That's the risk we take. But if we don't do this, he'll keep destroying lives. Yours could be next." As they left the diner, the tension between them hung like a thick fog. Malik clutched the flash drive in one hand, his backpack slung over his shoulder. Maya walked a few paces ahead, her sharp gaze darting around the empty street. "Where do we go from here?" Malik asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "My safe house," Maya replied without looking back. "It's not far. We can plan our next move there." But as they turned the corner, Malik's stomach dropped. Parked at the end of the block was the black SUV. Its engine idled softly, the tinted windows masking whoever sat inside. "They found us," Malik said, his voice tight with fear. Maya's eyes narrowed. "Stay calm. Follow my lead." The SUV's doors opened, and two men in suits stepped out, their movements precise and purposeful. One of them held a phone to his ear, speaking in hushed tones, while the other scanned the street with a predatory gaze. Maya grabbed Malik's arm and pulled him into an alley, their footsteps echoing against the brick walls. "Run," she hissed. They sprinted through the narrow passage, their breaths coming in ragged gasps. Malik's heart pounded in his ears as they weaved through a maze of alleys and side streets. Behind them, the sound of footsteps grew louder. "They're gaining on us," Malik yelled, panic clawing at his throat. "Not for long," Maya shot back. She yanked him toward a fire escape ladder and gestured for him to climb. "Go. Now." Malik scrambled up the metal rungs, his hands slick with sweat. Maya followed close behind, pulling the ladder up just as one of the men reached for it. From their vantage point on the rooftop, They watched as the men regrouped below, their frustration evident even from a distance. Maya pulled out her phone and dialed a number, her voice calm but urgent. "They found us. I need an extraction." The safe house was a modest apartment on the edge of the city, its plain exterior blending seamlessly with the surrounding buildings. Inside, however, it was a stark contrast. Walls lined with maps, notes, and photographs connected by red string, like something out of a spy movie. Maya motioned for Malik to sit at the small table in the center of the room. She plugged the flash drive into a laptop and began pulling up files, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "These are the names you need to remember," she said, pointing to a list of contacts linked to Alistair's operations. "Hawks, Leonetti, Mendoza. They're the ones funneling money through his businesses. If we expose them, we expose him." Malik's head spun as he took it all in. He wasn't just up against Alistair. This was a network, a web of corruption that extended far beyond anything he could have imagined. "What if they come after us?" Malik asked, his voice trembling. "They will," Maya replied bluntly. "But that's why we need to act fast. Once this goes public, they'll be too busy trying to cover their tracks to come after us." Malik nodded, his fear slowly giving way to determination. He didn't know what the next steps would bring, but one thing was clear. There was no turning back now. The trap. The safe house buzzed with a nervous energy as Malik and Maya worked late into the night. The documents and files spread across the table painted a vivid picture of Victor Alistair's criminal empire. Offshore accounts, wire transfers, dummy corporations, all of it connected in a web of deceit that spanned continents. It was overwhelming, but Malik couldn't afford to think about the enormity of it. He focused on the task at hand: survival. "This isn't just about your uncle, is it?" Malik asked, glancing at Maya as she tapped furiously on her laptop. "These people, Hawks, Mendoza, they're dangerous." "Dangerous doesn't even cover it," Maya replied, her voice edged with tension. "They're not just laundering money. They're fueling operations that destroy lives. Drugs, weapons, human trafficking. It's all connected. My uncle's just the middleman, but he's the one who makes it all look legitimate." Malik felt a cold pit form in his stomach. He had thought he was just dealing with a corrupt billionaire, but now it was clear he was caught in something far bigger and far deadlier. The first rays of dawn seeped through the safe house's thick curtains as Maya finally leaned back in her chair, rubbing her tired eyes. "I've encrypted the files," she said, pointing to a USB drive sitting on the table. "This is everything we have. My research, the documents you found, and the proof of those offshore accounts. We need to get this into the hands of someone who can actually do something about it." "Who?" Malik asked. "The police? The FBI?" Maya shook her head. "Alistair has people everywhere. Judges, law enforcement, even politicians. We can't trust the usual channels. But I know someone who can help. He's an investigative journalist named Ben Torres. He's been trying to expose my uncle for years, but he never had enough evidence. With this, he can't fail." That afternoon, Maya and Malik set out to meet Ben. The USB drive was safely hidden in Maya's backpack, and they had agreed on a public park as their rendezvous point, somewhere open enough to discourage any immediate confrontation. As they walked through the crowded streets, Malik couldn't shake the feeling that they were being followed. Every shadow seemed to move. Every passerby seemed to linger just a little too long. He kept glancing over his shoulder, his nerves on edge. "Relax," Maya whispered, her voice barely audible. "Act natural. If they see us panicking, they'll know we're onto them." Malik nodded, but the knot in his stomach refused to loosen. When they arrived at the park, it was bustling with activity. Children played on the swings, joggers looped around the trails, and couples sat on benches enjoying the crisp autumn air. Ben Torres was easy to spot, a tall man with wire-rimmed glasses and a worn leather messenger bag slung over his shoulder. He stood near the fountain, scanning the crowd. Maya led the way, her pace brisk but measured. As they approached, Ben gave a small nod of recognition. "Maya," he said, his voice calm but urgent. "I was beginning to think you wouldn't make it." "We don't have much time," Maya replied, pulling the USB drive from her bag. "This is everything we have. It's enough to bring Victor down, but you need to move fast." Ben took the drive, slipping it into his bag. "I'll verify everything tonight. If it checks out, I'll publish the story by morning. Once it's live, the world will know the truth." "And what about us?" Malik asked, his voice tinged with worry. "What happens when Alistair finds out?" Ben hesitated, his expression somber. "Once this goes public, he'll be too busy trying to cover his tracks to come after you, at least for a while. But you need to be careful. These people don't play by the rules." The meeting ended quickly, and Maya and Malik began the long walk back to the safe house. Malik felt a flicker of hope for the first time in days. The evidence was in Ben's hands now, and soon the truth would be out. But as they turned onto a quieter street, that hope was abruptly crushed. The black SUV was parked halfway down the block, its engine idling. Malik's heart sank. "They're here." "Stay calm," Maya said, though her voice was tight with fear. "We can't lead them back to the safe house." The SUV's doors opened, and two men stepped out. Both wore dark suits and mirrored sunglasses, their expressions unreadable. One of them began walking toward Maya and Malik, his movements slow but deliberate. "Run," Maya whispered. They bolted down the street, their footsteps echoing against the pavement. Malik's lungs burned as he pushed himself to keep up with Maya, who seemed to know exactly where she was going. They darted into an alley, weaving through the narrow passageways in a desperate attempt to lose their pursuers. But the men were faster than Malik had expected. He could hear their footsteps growing louder, their voices shouting commands into radios. The alley twisted and turned, and Malik's panic grew as he realized they were running out of options. "This way," Maya shouted, pulling him toward a fire escape ladder. They scrambled up the rickety metal rungs, their hands slipping on the cold steel. When they reached the rooftop, Maya yanked the ladder up, sending it clattering to the ground below. The men stopped at the base of the building, their frustration evident. One of them pulled out a phone, speaking rapidly into it. Malik's chest heaved as he tried to catch his breath, his eyes darting to Maya. "What now?" he asked, his voice shaky. Maya didn't answer. Her eyes were fixed on the horizon, where a second black SUV was pulling up to the scene. "We need to split up," she said finally. "It's the only way." "No way," Malik protested. "We're in this together. If they catch both of us, it's over," Maya insisted. She reached into her jacket and pulled out a small slip of paper, pressing it into Malik's hand. "This is the address of a safe house. Go there and wait for me." "Maya." "Go," she snapped, her voice leaving no room for argument. Malik hesitated, then turned and ran. He didn't look back as he climbed down the other side of the building and disappeared into the maze of streets. His mind raced as he clutched the slip of paper, his legs carrying him toward an uncertain future. Behind him, the sound of shouting and footsteps faded into the distance. But even as he reached the edge of the city, Malik knew the chase was far from over. The storm breaks. Malik sprinted through the unfamiliar streets, clutching the slip of paper Maya had given him. His lungs burned, and his legs screamed for rest, but he didn't dare slow down. The city seemed to stretch endlessly before him, a maze of alleyways and deserted intersections. Each shadow felt alive, every distant sound a potential threat. The address scrawled on the paper led him to a rundown apartment complex on the outskirts of the city. The building was unassuming, its brick facade cracked and weathered, the kind of place no one would look twice at. Malik hesitated at the entrance, scanning the area for any sign of the black SUVs or the men in suits. When he saw nothing, he slipped inside. The interior was dimly lit, the air heavy with the smell of mildew and old paint. Malik climbed the creaking stairs to the third floor, his hand gripping the splintered banister. At the end of the narrow hallway, he found the apartment number Maya had written down. He knocked twice, his knuckles trembling against the wood. The door creaked open, revealing a tall man with a rough beard and wary eyes. He was dressed in jeans and a plain black sweater, but the way he carried himself screamed military experience. "You Malik?" the man asked, his voice low but firm. Malik nodded, his throat dry. "Maya sent me." The man stepped aside, letting Malik enter. Inside, the apartment was bare bones but secure, reinforced locks on the windows, a stack of monitors displaying live surveillance feeds, and a single duffel bag packed with what looked like survival gear. "I'm Nate," the man said, closing the door behind them. "Maya said you'd be coming. You'll be safe here for now." For the next few hours, Malik paced the small apartment, his anxiety growing with each passing minute. Nate sat at a small table near the monitors, his sharp eyes flicking between the screens. Occasionally, he jotted something down in a battered notebook, but he didn't say much. "Do you think she's okay?" Malik finally asked, breaking the heavy silence. Nate glanced at him, his expression unreadable. "Maya's smart. If anyone can outmaneuver Alistair's men, it's her." The words were meant to reassure, but they did little to ease Malik's worry. He couldn't stop thinking about Maya, about the look in her eyes when she told him to run. She had known the risk, and she had taken it anyway. As night fell, the weight of exhaustion finally caught up with Malik. He sank onto the worn couch, his body aching from the day's events. Just as his eyes began to close, Nate's voice cut through the quiet. "We've got movement." Malik jolted upright, his heart hammering. Nate was staring intently at one of the monitors, his hand resting on a small earpiece. "What is it?" Malik asked, his voice tight. "Looks like they've found us," Nate replied, his tone grim. He stood and grabbed the duffel bag, tossing it onto the couch beside Malik. "We need to move. Now." Malik's stomach twisted. "What about Maya? What if she'll know what to do," Nate interrupted. "Right now, we focus on getting you out of here." The two of them slipped out through a back exit, Nate leading the way. They moved quickly but carefully, sticking to the shadows and avoiding main roads. Malik's nerves were on edge, every creak of a branch or distant car engine making him jump. After nearly an hour of weaving through alleys and side streets, they reached an old industrial warehouse on the edge of the city. Nate unlocked a rusted side door and ushered Malik inside. The warehouse was cavernous and dark, the faint smell of oil lingering in the air. Nate guided Malik to a small office in the corner, where a single desk lamp cast a dim glow over a map of the city. "This is our fallback point," Nate explained, spreading the map out on the desk. "From here, we can monitor their movements and plan our next step." Malik nodded, though his mind was spinning. He felt like a pawn in a game he barely understood, and every move seemed more dangerous than the last. As the night stretched on, Malik and Nate worked to piece together their next steps. They communicated sparingly, their focus on staying ahead of Alistair's men. But just as they were beginning to feel a sliver of hope, the sound of tires screeching outside shattered the fragile calm. Nate's head snapped up, his hand already reaching for the gun holstered at his hip. "Stay here," he ordered, his voice sharp. "Lock the door behind me." Malik's chest tightened as Nate disappeared into the shadows. He moved to the window, peering out cautiously. His blood ran cold when he saw 3 black SUVs parked outside, their engines rumbling. Men in dark suits spilled out of the vehicles, their movements coordinated and deliberate. The first gunshot made Malik jump, the sharp crack echoing through the warehouse. His instincts screamed at him to run, but his legs felt like lead. More gunfire followed, and Malik realized with horror that the men were closing in fast. As the chaos outside escalated, Malik's phone buzzed in his pocket. He fumbled to answer it, his hands shaking. "Maya," he whispered. "Malik, listen to me." Maya's voice came through, breathless but steady. "I know where you are. I'm coming to get you." "Maya, they're already here," Malik said, his voice breaking. "Nate's trying to hold them off. But just stay alive." Maya interrupted. "I'm almost there. Don't let them take you." The line went dead, leaving Malik alone in the dark. He clutched the phone to his chest, his heart racing as footsteps echoed outside the office door. The door burst open, and Malik barely had time to react before two men grabbed him. He struggled against their iron grip, kicking and shouting, but it was no use. They dragged him out of the office and into the main part of the warehouse, where the rest of Alistair's men waited. "Mr. Alistair will be very interested to see you," one of the men sneered. But before they could move further, a deafening roar filled the air. Malik looked up just in time to see a black motorcycle barrel through the warehouse entrance, its rider clad in black and moving with lethal precision. Maya. She dismounted in one fluid motion, her movements a blur as she took down the nearest man with a swift kick. Chaos erupted as Nate reappeared, his gun blazing. Malik seized the opportunity to break free, stumbling toward Maya as she fought off another attacker. "Let's go," she shouted, grabbing his arm. Together, they raced toward the warehouse exit, dodging bullets and shouts. They didn't stop running until they were far from the warehouse, the sounds of the fight fading into the distance. When they finally stopped to catch their breath, Maya turned to Malik, her face streaked with sweat and dirt. "We can't keep running," she said, her voice shaking. "It's time to take this public." Malik nodded, his fear giving way to a steely determination. He didn't know what the next step would bring, but he was ready to fight. The truth was too important to bury, and Victor Alistair's empire was about to crumble. The reckoning. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting long shadows across the city as Malik and Maya found temporary refuge in an abandoned parking garage. Their breaths were labored, their bodies exhausted from the harrowing escape at the warehouse. The air was cold, biting against their skin, but it did little to numb the reality of what lay ahead. Maya paced the concrete floor, her mind clearly racing. Malik sat on a crumbling ledge, his hands trembling as he clutched the USB drive containing the evidence they'd risked everything to secure. Despite the danger that seemed to close in with every passing moment, a newfound determination burned in his chest. "We're running out of time," Maya said, breaking the tense silence. "Victor knows we're closing in. If we don't act now, he'll either disappear or find a way to silence us for good." Malik looked up at her, his voice steady despite his exhaustion. "You said we needed to go public. How do we do that without getting caught?" Maya stopped pacing, turning to face him. "Ben's already working on it. I sent him the location of a secure server where we can upload everything. Once it's live, it's untouchable. Every news outlet, every government agency, every activist group will have access to it. But we have to make sure it gets there safely." Malik swallowed hard, nodding. "What's the plan?" Maya crouched beside him, her eyes locked onto his. "We split up. You take the drive and head to Ben's backup location. I'll create a diversion to throw Victor's men off your trail." "No," Malik said immediately, shaking his head. "I'm not letting you face them alone." "You don't have a choice," Maya shot back. "This isn't just about you or me anymore. If we don't finish this, everything we've done, everything we've risked, will mean nothing." Malik hesitated, the weight of her words sinking in. Finally, he nodded. "Okay, where's the backup location?" 2 hours later, Malik found himself navigating the labyrinth of the city's subway system. The USB drive felt like a live wire in his pocket, its significance amplifying the tension in his chest. Every time a train screeched to a stop or a stranger brushed past him, his heart jumped, his eyes darting to the nearest exit. Maya's instructions were clear. Deliver the drive to a nondescript building in the industrial district. Ben would meet him there, and together they would ensure the files were uploaded. The closer Malik got to his destination, the more the world around him seemed to blur. The faces in the crowd, the announcements over the intercom, the rattling of the train, all of it faded into the background, his focus narrowing to a single purpose. Meanwhile, Maya played her role to perfection. She drove a battered sedan she had hot-wired earlier, weaving through the city with Victor's men hot on her trail. The black SUVs were relentless, their engines roaring as they closed the gap. Maya glanced in her rearview mirror, her jaw tightening as she spotted one of the vehicles pull alongside her. With a sharp turn, she veered into a narrow alley, the screech of tires echoing off the brick walls. The SUVs followed, but Maya had planned for this. She slammed on the brakes, sending her car into a controlled skid that blocked the alley. She jumped out, sprinting toward a side exit, as the men scrambled to navigate the chaos. At the industrial district, Malik reached the designated building, a plain, windowless structure that seemed utterly unremarkable. He hesitated at the entrance, scanning his surroundings for any sign of danger. When he saw none, he pushed the door open and stepped inside. The interior was dimly lit, the air thick with the scent of grease and metal. Malik's footsteps echoed as he made his way to the back, where Ben stood waiting beside a row of old computers. The journalist looked up, relief washing over his face as he spotted Malik. "You made it," Ben said, motioning for him to hurry. "Do you have the drive?" Malik nodded, pulling it from his pocket. "Here." Ben took the drive and immediately plugged it into one of the computers. His fingers flew across the keyboard, his focus intense as he navigated through encrypted systems. "Once this uploads, there's no going back," Ben said, his voice steady but serious. "Are you ready for that?" Malik didn't hesitate. "I've been ready since the moment I found that wallet." The computer screen lit up with progress bars as the files began uploading to the secure server. Malik watched in silence, his chest tightening with each passing second. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to go wrong. Outside, the sound of screeching tires shattered the quiet. Malik turned toward the door, his heart sinking as the unmistakable hum of SUV engines filled the air. Ben froze, his hands hovering over the keyboard. "They're here," Malik whispered. Ben nodded grimly, pulling a small handgun from his bag and handing it to Malik. "We need to hold them off until the upload finishes. Can you handle this?" Malik took the weapon, his hands trembling. "I'll try." The door burst open, and Victor's men flooded in, their dark suits and cold eyes making them look more like predators than humans. Malik and Ben ducked behind a stack of crates, the sound of gunfire erupting around them. Malik's heart pounded as he returned fire, each shot a desperate attempt to buy time. Ben worked frantically to protect the upload, shouting updates over the chaos. 2 minutes, he yelled. "Just hold them off for 2 more minutes." As the fight raged on, Malik spotted a familiar figure among the attackers. Victor Alastair himself. The billionaire strode into the room with an air of confidence, his cold gaze locking onto Malik. "You think you can win this?" Alastair called out, his voice cutting through the gunfire. "You're a kid playing a game you don't understand. Give me the drive, and I might let you walk away." "Not a chance," Malik shouted back, his grip tightening on the gun. Alastair's expression darkened, and he motioned to his men. "Take them." But before they could advance, a deafening crash echoed through the building. The side wall exploded inward, sending debris flying as Maya barreled through in a stolen truck. She leaped out, her movements quick and precise, as she opened fire on Alastair's men. "Maya," Malik called, relief flooding his voice. "Get that upload finished," she shouted, taking cover behind the truck. The tide of the fight shifted as Maya and Malik worked together to hold off the attackers. Ben shouted from his station, "It's done. The files are live." Victor Alastair's calm facade finally cracked. His men began retreating as the realization of their failure sank in. Maya turned to Malik, her expression fierce. "Let's get out of here." They didn't wait for Alastair's retaliation. Together, they fled into the night, the weight of their actions settling heavily on their shoulders. The truth was out now, and the world would see Victor Alistair for what he truly was. The next morning, news of Alistair's crimes dominated every headline. The files Malik and Maya had risked everything to expose were dissected by journalists, shared across social media, and investigated by law enforcement agencies worldwide. Victor Alistair's empire crumbled in real time, his once unshakable influence reduced to rubble. Malik sat in a quiet corner of a diner, watching the coverage on a small TV mounted to the wall. Maya sat across from him, a faint smile on her lips. "You did it," she said softly. "We did it," Malik corrected, meeting her gaze. For the first time in weeks, Malik felt a sense of peace. The fight wasn't over. There would be fallout, investigations, and dangers yet to come. But for now, the truth had won, and that was enough.